Greetings all, and welcome to the third segment of A Traveler's Guide 2 for Aether. And today, we will be continuing with our examination of the planet in this next segment, A Traveler's Guide to Torvus Bog. The land that was once filled with great and natural beauty, Torvus Forest, was devastated by the effects of the impacting Leviathan on Aether, and was subsequently drowned in never-ending storms, flooding the land and turning it into Torvus Bog that still exists to this day. Although Luminol did their best to try and build machines that could help pump out some of the water, and went so far as to establish a mechanical generator and pump system in the flooded pits of the land, it was not enough to help Torvus recover from its state. The monstrous creatures that invaded the land shortly afterwards, namely the amphibious drenched and aquatic blogs, only served to further make it a violent place to survive. And with all these natural threats to worry about, it is no wonder why they were able to take power from the Torvus Temple and return the life of its guardian Avok, though at least Avok's predecessor Beastes was able to die peacefully of old age. It was here that the Hunter was forced to traverse not only the bog itself and its rotting architecture, but also the hydrodynamo station built by the Luminoth in the deepest reaches of the land, and was forced to kill an alpha blog in order to escape from these corridors. Before we take a look at the more active life forms in this area, it is important to note the native flora that help to form the backbone of the diet and food web that exists in Torvus Bog, as well as entities that have already been covered in previous video reports. And on that note, as far as can be spoken on previously covered organisms, Torvus Bog is home to some species of fairly normal fish, shriekbats, and brisgi in its lower depths. Now, on to some new entries for minor creatures in the area. The Torvus Bog possesses a thick green plant base with red organs on its sides that are filled with an acidic gas. The Luminoth bioengineered these creatures to grow up and around items for storage, and are perfectly adapted for Torvus Bog, as they are resistant to the harsh chemicals and diseases that run rampant in the swamp. While they have no direct way of protecting themselves against attack, and can be ruptured with a bit of sustained firepower, most creatures prefer to stay away from them and avoid eating them, as the red nodules on the outside will readily release their acidic gas when they burst and can damage armor and even kill small life forms with this gas alone. The Torvus hanging pod, like the Torvus pod, is a bioengineered pod made to grow around objects as they form their fruit, which looks like a bulbous red biomass coated in a brown epidermis. These fruits can hang from the respective parent gland for many weeks at a time, and are usually difficult for most creatures to get at, but a few shots with a basic weapon can easily dislodge them from the roost. Most of these pods were raided by the Luminoth during their earliest skirmishes with the Ing, but a few can still be found that may have items left over from the war. The blown sac is a rare plant that's usually seen thriving in damp environments like swamps and bogs, but its body form is rather flexible in terms of environmental preferences, so it can be found just about any place on a planet as long as there is adequate rainfall. The blown sac itself is actually a welcome plant to most, as it naturally produces benevolent gases to help other plants in its environment grow stronger and more resistant to the effects of toxins, playing an important role in the ecology of its natural habitat. The plant itself, though, should not be approached as one is hungry, as the plant secretes a venomous sap all over its body that can cause intense pain and even kill those that would dare to dine on it, leaving only a select few creatures that can handle its sap, and thus ensuring that the blown sac is not easily preyed upon or removed from the areas that it often helps make more vibrant and healthy from an ecological standpoint. Sentinel crystals were originally built by the Luminoth in order to keep a close eye on the activities of the Ing during the war in place of actual soldiers. The devices are constructed out of a durable biometal excreted from the bioengineered plant form that can process psychic energy and visualize it at the same time, essentially allowing the Luminoth to directly interface with the device with their minds to see what it is seeing through its otherwise non-functional ocular tissue. These devices are surprisingly sturdy and are able to hold up against harsh attacks for a considerable amount of time, though the ravages of war had nonetheless left many of them deactivated or otherwise destroyed. The few that were left prior to the end of the war were used by Umos in order to keep watch over the Ing horde and observe their activity, a trait that proved to be invaluable to helping the Hunter find the next destination to go to after the fall of Dark Agon Wastes. Alright then, with those minor details out of the way, now let's take a look at some of the more prominent and deadlier life forms that can be found within Torvus Bog.
As seen on other planets, venomweed is a highly dangerous mutant strain of the tangleweed that is readily distinguished only by its extremely bright colors, but has equally intense toxins. Although they demonstrate the exact same behavior as tangleweed, these creatures possess a powerful acidic toxin that can not only harm and kill larger creatures, which seems to be the reason why they developed such a strong toxin in the first place, but also have the ability to actually corrode metal and damage energy shields, so much in fact that they will actually damage the armor suit of anyone foolish enough to step in a patch of them. The fact that they will wrap around and slow down anything that gets close to them can make them a bigger threat than normal tangleweed, but they are thankfully not as dangerous as many of the more intelligent life forms that occupy their native planets, so they are a minor damaging nuisance at best that can be easily, though only temporarily, scared into retreat from a shot from a beam weapon.
That being said, the damage they can do is nonetheless steady and can wreak havoc on any sort of protection one chooses to wear in their presence, so for the sake of safety, I'll grade these creatures up at threat level beta. They won't hurt you extensively, but without serious protection, they can leave really nasty scars and acidic burns in their wake.
The Shredder is a mobile plant form related to the Shrieker that can more than prove to be a bit of a hassle in large numbers, and they cannot be cut down from afar. The Shredder is a simple plant form that spends most of its life buried in the ground, with only its top set of leaves poking out of the ground to gather what little sunlight is available in Torvus Bog, and slowly absorbing nutrients from the otherwise rich soil that characterizes the area. The moment that Shredders detect unusual vibrations near them in the ground that might signal a predator of some sort, these creatures will hoist themselves out of the ground and start to fly by rapidly rotating their leaves like a helicopter blade. They will then proceed to slowly float over to their potential attacker. If the attacker leaves, they can return back to a state of ease in the ground, but if they cannot deter their predator with their movements alone, they will fly towards the attacker and will swell in size to get increasingly closer until they violently explode in their face, releasing a massive cloud of thorns they hide on the inside of their fleshy pink bodies that is sure to kill anything that isn't wearing armor of some sort. A Shredder can be attacked with just about any type of weapon, but caution must be paid, as the more damage they take, the more their bodies will bulge out and the brighter the whiteness of the outer skin will become until they violently explode anyways. This can be used to one's advantage, however, as the explosion of one Shredder will actually inflict damage to those around it, and since they tend to travel together in small packs, attacking one while the others are relatively close to bursting can send them over the edge and kill the entire group in one go, though this must be done carefully as the thorns have a deceptive reach to them when released.
They might be able to withstand a decent amount of damage, but these plants are far less dangerous than their Shrieker relatives and should thus only be feared when in large numbers. That being said, the way the bodies are designed to make close quarters attacks a poor choice is still noteworthy and lands them a place in threat level beta.
The Shrieker is a fairly uncommon carnivorous plant that has learned how to use the power of sound in order to attack and destroy prey items that dare to get near them. The Shrieker possesses a root-like body with a main root stem connected to what looks like a flower structure, but it's actually the fleshy orange jaws of the plant. The top of the plant is adorned with a series of leaf-like shoots that contain powerful electromagnetic cells that enable the creatures to levitate off the ground for short periods of time. These leaves also act as a perfect disguise, as the Shrieker will usually wait half buried beneath the surface of the ground for prey to step near them by accident without realizing just what sort of trouble they are in. Once it senses that the ground vibrations from a walking prey item are very close to it, a Shrieker will leap out of its hole and begin to fire a sonic blast at its target in order to disorient them, at which point the Shrieker will swoop in and start to slather their prey with digestive juices, biting hunks of meat off the victim before flying away and reburying itself somewhere else. The Shrieker is not extremely durable and thus can be somewhat easy to destroy with a few charged shots or something like the Dark Beam, but just hitting it accurately is the hard part. As a side effect of adapting to using sound as a weapon, these creatures also possess an active camouflage system in their cells that allows them to both vanish from the sight of others and transmit a sonic signal that can disrupt most types of visors, making it impossible to even see them with a dark visor or lock onto them with a missile. They can, however, still be tracked with echo visor technology and can thus be beaten at their own game, but caution is still recommended, as they tend to appear out of nowhere and can easily get the drop on anyone that's not paying attention to them, since the only time they virtually allow themselves to be seen is when they are directing their energy reserves to fire an attack instead of hiding.
All in all, while the attacks might not be incredibly damaging, their capacity to readily surprise others and vanish from sight can make them a severe nuisance to deal with if they can't be tracked visually somehow, and more than deserving of a post within threat level beta.
The Crocus is a heavily shelled mollusk that is kind of perfectly adapted to the dank and somewhat toxic air of Torvus Bog, and is one of the few creatures that has actually benefited tremendously from the conversion of the area from a forested land to a vile bog. The Crocus possesses a single pair of clawed appendages that it uses for grasping onto surfaces and dragging across them. This is held up by a slimy lubricant that excretes from the bottom of their body, which is slightly acidic and helps to maintain a low level of friction for the beast since it does not have the muscles needed to easily lift itself significantly off the ground, usually only in short, rigid hops. The creature feeds with a tube-like proboscis that sucks up small pieces of plant matter from pools of water and is only able to really feed off a single type of plant, which is located in only one room in the Torvus complex, and thus limits them to a very small area of the bog. Although many of the creatures that live in Torvus Bog have suffered considerably in most cases as a result of the near-constant deluge that covers the land, these creatures have adapted to thrive off the air in the bog by taking the toxins in it created from rotting biomatter and absorbing them into the gills protected by a thick back shell, instantly breaking the chemicals down into an energy source that can enable them to go without having to actually eat anything for days at a time. However, this act also makes the creatures vulnerable, as while the main bodies are heavily armored and possess a thick glass-like shell material over their gills, they have to open their shells in order to breathe in these toxins and thus reveal the only true weak point, the flesh within. Even so, the crocus is a surprisingly hardy creature that can take more damage than it might appear to be capable of, and they are still better left alone, as they do not cause direct harm except through contact damage. Plus, they are so limited in terms of population numbers that attacking and killing more than a few in the small area they live in could render them highly endangered as a species.
As such, they easily rank within threat level alpha and can even make for handy pets if you can manage to replicate the exact environmental conditions they otherwise thrive within on Aether.
Based on puffers, Parade tell the results of space-powered experimentation and serve as nasty little cyborgs that can be both spies and active threat to anything that gets near them. Filled with toxic no-hiding gas, and with a rodent tube-like body that is very similar to that of relatives on planets like Talon 4, these creatures are used by space pirates to patrol areas of interest and explore small passages that are otherwise inaccessible to the larger form. These aggressive monsters are still fairly unintelligent, but they are advised to be avoided anyways, as they can still rupture from even the slightest bit of forceful contact, and the toxic gas they release is just as nasty as that of their natural counterparts.
As a consequence, they are equally classified as part of threat level beta alongside other types of puffers, and worth rupturing from afar to clear the hazards from an area before exploring further.
The Sporb is a predatory plant found on Aether that more than demonstrates that one does not need to be extremely mobile to be an annoying threat from a distance. The Sporb shares a theme with the Shriekers of Torvus Bog in that they are carnivorous in nature and will eat just about anything that they can kill. The Sporb is born from a small seed that is embedded into a crack in a stone wall or other piece of infrastructure, where it grows a large base pod that is stuck to the wall by organic glue so strong that it is virtually impossible to break them off their base. Contained inside the base is a large tripartite appendage that looks like a flower but actually serves as the Sporb's equivalent of a face. They have no real vision to speak of, but they do have extrasensory patches of tissue on their false petals that allow them to hear the movements of other creatures and detect their positions so accurately that they can quickly target and attack a creature even if it's over 10 meters away. When active, the Sporb will carefully target the movements of nearby prey items and fire a burst of poisonous needles directly where they think the target is. This attack has a bit of a spread, and thus might not be able to hit a target with a ton of force, but can still strike targets fairly easily and can quickly incapacitate weaker creatures that do not have the armor needed to keep the needles from piercing their skin. Once they think they have sufficiently weakened their target, the Sporb's head will lash out with its massively long coiled neck and try to grasp the object with its 3 muscular false petals. While they are usually unable to grab larger creatures, objects like a morph ball are in danger, as the Sporb can pick up these objects and bash them around a little bit before releasing them, weakening their victim considerably and forcing them to hike back up to where they were before being attacked if they were traveling on an open structure. This could prove to be extremely annoying, as these creatures tend to plant themselves in areas where they are high up, as even if the prey cannot be killed, it can be dropped from a height that may kill them regardless, or at least force them to make their way back up to the top again where the Sporb can reach them.
Sporbs can take a decent amount of firepower to put down and are definitely an explorer's worst irritant in the pits of Torvus Bog, but the creatures thankfully still retain a common weakness to attacks from the Dark Beam and can thus be quickly dispatched if needed, and in turn belong within threat level beta.
The Seed Burster is a bizarre plant formed from Aether that more than demonstrates that not all plants are stuck living in a single spot for the duration of their life. In terms of appearances, Seed Bursters are comprised of a main seed body shaped like a thorn and 2 pairs of tiny legs they can use for the sake of locomotion. Seed bursters start their lives as normal seeds that grow a tough shell around their soft interiors underground, as well as their trademark legs. Once they have fully matured, they will dig their way to the surface using their bladed shells and wait for the seed burster to spawn to do the same, only leaving their birth area once they have enough members to be considered a swarm visually. These creatures never really evolve out of a seed stage, and have no need to, as they are able to gain most of the nutrients they need to survive in the rich soil of Torvus Bog, and thus only need water to survive for the brief time as an adult, which readily collects on the outer shell of their body before being drawn into a tiny siphon located on their underside. The moment that a seed burster matures, it already has a seed in its body and is thus ready to reproduce in a fertile soil patch, but because there is such a nutrient drain on the soil they live in as they develop, they cannot merely drop the seed there, but must instead look for a new fertile place to plant their seeds. As seed burster packs move along, they are effectively defenseless and can be destroyed with even basic gunfire, so they travel in large numbers to make it more likely that the species will survive. Moreover, if they really feel that they are in danger, they will increase the temperature of the water contained in their bodies to the point of boiling over with steam, which can quickly cause the seed burster's body to explode, firing their internal seed like a fiery projectile at their attackers. This oftentimes leads to the death of the seed from the sheer force of impact, but it is nonetheless a decently powerful strike that can easily deter most predators. This ensures that at least part of the swarm makes it to a new planting ground and can thus continue the basic cycle of life.
Seed bursters are benign on their own and should thus be avoided, ranking within threat level alpha nicely, But if they do become aggressive, staying clear of them is probably the best course of action from an ecological standpoint, as they can only produce one seed every year and are thus dependent upon the natural abilities to keep the populations going in the drenched tunnels of Torvus Bog.
The Drenchler is a vicious amphibious reptile known for being the top predator of Torvus Bog, an extremely powerful monster that has more than earned its reputation for being just as much of a threat to the Luminoth and those working with them as the Ing could in some cases. The Drenchler possesses a relatively simplified anatomy in that it only possesses a single pair of limbs for locomotion, but the body construct is built to perfectly take advantage of this, as the large heads make it easier for them to move and build up momentum in a forward direction. The stocky build and thick height of the Drenchler makes it very difficult to hurt and highly resistant to pain of almost any type, and there are a few things the creatures that they prey on can do to escape from them, as they are relentless hunters that will never stop chasing down a potential prey item until either they or the prey run out of stamina. The Drenchler possesses 5 pairs of eyes on its skull, as well as a 6th pair of eyes on the lower jaw. These grant the Drenchler not only excellent eyesight, but an amazing ability to see the world in a variety of forms, including basic color, infrared, ultraviolet, thermal, and electromagnetic readings, while the set of eyes lower jaw is mainly used for rapid motion detection. Their predatory prowess is further backed up by their massive jaws and giant teeth, which they can use to slice through flesh and crush bone without any trouble at all. Even if they cannot get its jaws around a target, the Drenchler can still attack by channeling electrical energy from its body into its central horn and firing it as a beam of raw energy that can seriously damage even armored opponents. Overall, the fast-moving Drenchler is a devastating predator that can be nigh impossible to hurt, especially when they reach their adult size and become even larger than a normal human, but they do still have one very serious weakness that only well-armed explorers can really take advantage of. Due to a genetic defect, the tail region of these creatures are bright red in color and have a much weaker hide covering them, making them susceptible to damage from explosive weapons like missiles and charged beam shots. Critical damage will destroy the hide covering and reveal a vulnerable nerve cluster at the base that can be targeted a few more direct blasts to kill the Drenchler. However, Drenchlers are more than aware of this weakness and will do their best to try and cover for it, keeping their faces directed towards the face of their prey item. The only clear way to get around them is to strafe around them when they are trying a charging attack, and even then it must be done quickly before they can turn around again.
As a whole, these beasts are considered to be a top threat in Torvus Bog, and often a beast best ran from than actually fought, even if you think you have the firepower to handle them, earning them a place within threat level Gamma. As a noble aside here, there is something of interest that really hasn't been talked about all that much, and that is why exactly adult Drenchlers have been found as corpses within the temple grounds, far from where they're supposed to be in Torvus Bog. Given that these beasts are equipped to hunt just about any type of prey item, it would make sense that it could allow larger, more durable adults to make the way far more so inland than the adolescents are often seen at. Plus, there's a distinct possibility that it might have been leaving and exploring inland shortly after Torvus Forest had been swamped into a bog, as the current water level is actually fairly low because of the pump systems and hydrodynamical chamber that was installed in the bog's depths. Regardless, the Galactic Federation Marines that had to face these adult monsters got lucky that they were actually able to kill them, and one can only dread the devastation that Drenchlers larger than people could actually cause. Shout out to Sablegear as well on Discord for helping Science Team with this one.
The Hideling is a small aquatic vertebrate that lives within the waters of Torvus Bog and acts as a minor predator near the bottom of the food chain. The Hideling itself is a fairly narrow body with little in the way of body meat around its small spine, with fin-like projections coming off the central body mass and a single one off the back of its head that can be beaten slowly and forcefully to propel the creature in the water through a series of tiny hops. The Hideling possesses a single main eye on its head and a tiny brain that is built for basic hunting tactics and little else, as it does not seem to have a very strong mental response when it comes to avoiding larger predators. Because their bodies are very frail and easily destroyed by any type of weapon fire, Hidelings travel in large numbers to make up for this, and are able to defend themselves with a small bite if they feel that they're being attacked. Sadly, this is the only form of offense that Hidelings have, and thus limits them to mainly scavenging for bits of food left in the water, as well as dining on small microorganisms for food. But this does not seem to bother the Hideling much, as the small teeth are still strong enough to pierce metal, and can thus inflict surprising damage against even armored creatures that underestimate their strength, leaving only a few in the waters of Aether that can safely try and eat them.
Even so, the lack of resiliency in their forms makes them easy to eliminate, even if they are traveling in the large schools they essentially need to survive in the presence of Torvus' aquatic predators, and thus belong within threat level Alpha.
The creatures related to the Blog hold a strong second place station for the most dangerous predators in Torvus Bog, and while the Drenchler may only beat them out as a result of its ability to live both in and out of the water, the Blog and all of its relatives are vile beasts that most fires will never be able to hurt unless they're willing to stare them down in the face of certain death. When these creatures are still young, they start off as a beast called a Blogling. In this form, they possess a turquoise-colored outer hide with a single large tail and a large head with a diamond shape to its overall form, and a very small set of weak jaws at the very front. Bloglings in their adult forms are actually blind and cannot see at all what is around them. Instead, they use sonar in the water to detect motion of prey items and other creatures when hunting. In their current form, however, these beasts have little in the way of offense, only being able to launch forward in a weak ramming attack in order to inflict damage. Without their adult hide to protect them and only the swimming speed to save them, these creatures can be harmed and easily killed with standard weapon fire, but they're usually best avoided if in the presence of adult blogs, as the monsters are very territorial and will violently attack anything that dares to hurt their infants.
As they are on their own, however, the creatures are not much of a threat until they can develop the thick armored hide that is characteristic of their adult form, and fit easily within threat level alpha.
The adult blog is a vicious monster possessing a tripartite jaw system and an extremely thick hide that is essentially impossible to breach without any standard type of conventional firepower. This essentially allows them to roam the waters of Torvus Bog at their discretion, as there is no native life form on the earth that is capable of even putting a scratch on these creatures. Although they might not be able to see the surroundings at all, the sonar system they are equipped with makes it very easy for them to detect prey nearby, and even grants them the ability to fire minor sonic projectiles to stun other creatures, despite that being a problematic tactic for the normal blog. Though it is known that an individual will have to get fairly close to a blog to entice it into attacking. Furthermore, it's known that while attacking the tail of a blog will not deal any damage to it at all, using an energy blast like a charged beam shot to strike them will create enough of a disturbance to garner their attention, usually followed by them charging towards the source of the blast at full force. Blogs are able to swim incredibly fast for their size and can thus put a ton of power into their charging attacks, usually enough to shatter their target and make it easier for the massive jaws to finish the job. In general, the blog is a hardy beast and seems like it might be impossible to defeat, but the creature does possess one key weakness that can be used against it: its mouth. Because of the way their jaw structure is aligned, there's essentially a straight shot from the center of their jaws all the way back into the stomachs and vital soft tissues. If a blog charges an individual, it will open its maw widely in order to crash into the target and bite off a massive chunk of them in the process. Just before impact though, a missile can be fired directly into the gullet to either heavily damage them or cause them to explode into bloody chunks outright, eliminating them rather easily.
Even so, there is not a task that should be approached without one's full attention, as the landing spot for said missile is narrow and a missed shot could easily spot the end for a foolish explorer. Combined with their aggressive behavior, this elevates them as a threat compared to the young, placing them clearly within threat level beta.
The dark blog was the result of an ing possessing a blog and converting it into a darkling, either as an adult blog or by forcing bloglings to rapidly mature into an adult state. But unlike other darklings, these creatures actually lose some of their power in the transition. Possessing the characteristic back spines of a warrior ing, the ing-controlled dark blog was much more resilient against damage and followed the same general attack pattern as normal blogs, but they were unable to use their sonar at all to attack. For some reason, the behavioral instincts of the blog made them harder to control than other creatures and took away one of their offensive traits as a result, which might explain why these creatures were rarely ever created by the ing unless a specific underwater situation called for the action to be attempted.
As such, the dark blog is a bit harder to defeat than a normal blog, but can otherwise be limited with the same tactics and thus equally belong in threat level beta. Though one will have to be careful to get out of the way when they charge, since a single missile won't be enough to actually do the job.
The largest and most powerful of the blogs is the Alpha blog, and while the only one that was known to exist was killed by the hunter after acquiring the gravity boost, it is more than likely that another one will see the light of day again. Though the extensions on its jaw seem to have been chipped away as a result of constantly fighting with other blog, this titanic beast was a devastating monster with more than enough stamina to take down anything that got in its way, blog or not. It is thought that the Alpha blog was kept in captivity for a while, feeding on hidlings for sustenance, as it was designed to be a trap for any darkling or other creature that tried to steal the gravity boost technology hidden in the deepest level of the bog. As such, it sadly came down to the hunter to hit that trap and terminate the monster. Biologically, there really was no difference between the Alpha blog and its brethren, aside from being much larger and being capable of taking much more damage in battle. But it was a bit smarter than them and knew how to use its own special powers effectively. Instead of just charging blindly at its target, the Alpha blog would fire a series of sonic bursts at its target to disorient them, at which point it would be much easier for the Alpha blog to rush at its prey and kill them with a single powerful bite. In the case of the hunter, these bursts had the effect of not only causing damage, but temporarily scrambling her visor and control systems, making it harder for her to actually avoid its ramming attack.
Thankfully though, this is not enough to make the Alpha blog an insurmountable presence, and with great patience and careful aim towards the exposed gullet, she was able to actually kill the beast. Nonetheless, it more than demonstrated itself to be a severe aggressive threat to deal with, and suitably should be ranked within threat level Gamma. Now, we've got two new entries that science team especially would like me to really cover here.
The pirate commandos were the most elite members of the space pirate forces on Aether, and more than able to show in battle their dedication to the way of hunting the hunter. The pirate commando was equipped with a sturdy armor suit that shows off their strangely petite frame and serves to protect them from harm efficiently, making them much harder to take down than the average pirate trooper. In terms of weapons, these creatures were equipped with improved weapons based on those carried by normal troopers, including a variable pulse cannon for long-range fighting, an E-grenade launcher for smoking out a target and dealing strong splash damage all around, and an energy scythe for close-quarter strikes to the torso. In addition, the backs of these suits possess thrusters that allow them to move readily in battle and dodge direct fire in an instant, very much like the thrusters located on the hunter's own power suit. These monsters were further equipped with their own personal energy shields they can deploy to protect against all types of attack, but these shields could only be deployed for a limited amount of time before they had to be recharged, and the pirate commandos could not use any of the weapons while the shield was active. All of this was compounded by the fact that pirate commandos always traveled in semi-large groups, and thus could overwhelm most targets in numbers alone.
While they might not be invincible by a long shot, pirate commandos were far smarter than the average trooper and would work together extensively in order to take down a target, no matter how outgunned they may have been, placing them high in the ranks of both honor and tenacity when it comes to space pirates as a whole, and earning a solid spot within threat level Delta.
Dark pirate commandos were the result of the Ing coming to appreciate the gadgetry of the space pirate force in Aether to the point of attacking and possessing their strongest soldiers in order to create some of the most durable of Darklings to ever be part of the Horde. Because of the incredible power these pirate commandos possessed, most of the space pirate forces of that type had already been possessed by the Ing before the Hunter's arrival in Aether, and were such an honor to use in the Horde that only Hunter Ing were allowed to possess them, as they could make the most of their abilities. The Dark Pirate Commando behaved similarly to its normal form, but it completely ditched the use of any shields, as the Hunter Ing did not feel they actually needed them to really defend themselves. This is because the ability to phase in and out of space-time possessed by Hunter Ing transferred to any creature they chose to possess, allowing these Darklings to phase in and out of reality as they wished, while leaving only a frail after-image of their form as they moved, though they could still be spotted with Dark Visor technology. Dark Pirate Commandos would usually attack their target by swarming them in pairs, trying to outflank their target at any and every opportunity to get a clean shot. Once the aim was set, these monsters could fire a charged entangler shot to damage targets from afar and encapsulate them in dark energy for a few moments of immobilization and continuous damage. If they are closer to the target, however, they could utilize an experimental EMP grenade launcher stolen from the space pirate forces to fire rounds that not only explode and damage anything within their vicinity, but also create electronic interference and any visor technology nearby, potentially blinding their target if they are wearing a power suit. The Dark Pirate Commandos were among the most powerful members of the Ing Horde and could be a nightmare to deal with in battle, but a combination of an entangler shot and a missile could still shatter them just as easily as any other creature, and was thus the preferred method for eliminating them in any and all situations.
Nonetheless, the addition of cloaking abilities to this entity could make it a noble threat to deal with if not handled with the right equipment, and turn places them solidly within threat level Delta alongside their non-possessed brethren. Alright, now we've taken a thorough look at the light world part of Torvus Bog. It is now time to get the best light-based gear we can afford and prepare to take a noxious dive as we turn our attention to this land's former dark counterpart, Dark Torvus Bog.
Dark Torvus Bog was the Dark World equivalent to Torvus Bog, and was generally much more difficult to traverse than its Light World counterpart, not just because of the dark atmosphere, but because of the dark waters that swamped parts of it, which was so toxic that only the light suit could completely protect against their corrosive effects. Moreover, the entire world was actually split into two separate areas, as the submerged section of the Dark World was so dangerously toxic that even the Ing had a need to hold back the waters to a minor degree. Strangely, this was the only area in the entire Dark World where warrior Ing were not really found much. This may also be just a product of a lack of land to run on, while the flying Hunter Ing serving its defensive purpose more efficiently. It was here that the Hunter was able to defeat the Boost, Grapple, and Powerbomb Guardians, and was additionally where she confronted and killed the Chika in the Dark Torvus Temple, a monstrous dragonfly-like insect with access to both light and dark powers, to drain the energy from the Dark Torvus Energy Controller. Additionally, this area serves the holding location for two Skeg Temple keys that are located with Luminov key bearers G-Shish, who died in battle against an Ing Horde leader, and Estilim, who was killed by a surprise attack from behind, both unable to make it back to the entrance of the Sky Temple to put them back in their proper place.
It should be noted this land is home to dark preeds, ingworms, inglets, and darkling tentacles as far as things go in previously covered denizens. As for Dark Torvus Bog, here are a few more minor entries or non-Ing threats and darklings to get us started here.
While the Sentinel crystals created by the Luminov on their own were quite useful, it wasn't long before the Luminov realized that they too were vulnerable to the effects of Dark Aether, as most of the Sentinel crystals they put into that world would fail shortly after installation as a result of corrosion from constant exposure to the toxic air of the land. In order to make up for this flaw, the Luminov constructed the Dark Sentinel crystal, which is sheathed in dark energy for the sake of its protection. These devices are a bit rarer than their brethren as a result of the advanced material needed to construct them, but they prove to be much more durable and reliable in Dark Aether and against the attacks of the Ing than their Light World counterparts. The Watch Drone is a machine that was originally built by the Luminoth to guard key areas in battle and effectively hinder the progression of the Ing in the Dark World. These machines are comprised of a massive radiant central body with a trio of thick stubby legs powered by tension-mounted muscle substitutes to enable them to easily lift up their incredibly heavy bodies, and a series of infrared scanners at the top of the main body for observing creatures that are taller than them and taking cues from them. The Watch Drone's armor is extremely thick and protects the more delicate circuitry within them so well that they are essentially indestructible in regards to the capabilities of conventional weaponry. These machines served their purpose well for some time and helped the Luminoth in fighting near the waters of the Dark Torvus Bog, but the Ing ultimately turned them against their creators, using them to guard things of importance to the Ing, such as the key to the Sky Temple. In its reprogrammed state, the Watch Drone is still indestructible and is powerful enough that it can survive in the toxic waters of Dark Aether indefinitely, but this has also rendered the machine's visual sensors vulnerable to bright lights. If a safe zone is somehow activated in the vicinity of the visual sensors, it will wake them out of the normal state of stasis, taking on to conserve power, and force them to move to a different spot to get away from the safe zone, only returning to the original post when the light fades away.
While this can make them a noble hazard to deal with in the toxic waters they call home, at the very least they cannot actually cause any direct harm to entities on their own, and can be programmed in order to actually restore the loyalty as needed, so they can't rank any higher spot than within threat level Alpha. Now, let's cover some new Darklings that can be found in this location.
The Dark Phlogus was a creature related to the puddle spore of Talon 4 that had only been known to exist on Dark Aether, as its light world counterpart was hunted to extinction by the Ing. The Dark Phlogus was very similar to the puddle spore anatomically in its body and shell design, with the only major difference being the top shell had a large spine that prevented anyone from simply trying to jump on them to get across. Unlike the peaceful Talon 4 relatives, these creatures were active hunters and dwelled in dark waters where they could easily pretend to be just a rock or some other inanimate object. They would perform the same behavioral ritual as the puddle spore when a target approached. Specifically, they would lift up their shell, and if the threat or prey item did not back away, it would slam its shell shut and spray dark venom at the target in the hopes that it would hurt or even kill them. If a kill was successful, these beasts would slowly move over to the meal and spit digestive enzymes on it so they could slowly move up and over it and suck it up from a hidden mouth on the bottom shell's lower half. However, in doing so, these creatures revealed the nervous system of their bodies in the middle, and if shot with any type of beam weapon, they would instantly retract and flip over in a defensive position and release an energy shield that worked just like a safe zone from a light crystal or beacon, allowing travelers to hop onto the smooth bottom shell and across any body of toxic water that may have been in their path. It is interesting to note these monsters seem to be a bit weaker than the puddle spore relatives, as while they were mostly indestructible thanks to their shells, if the nervous system was exposed, they could be completely killed with the devastating force of a power bomb.
Thankfully, these monsters can only really be classified as part of threat level Alpha along with their puddle spore relatives, and went extinct with the rest of all the life on Dark Aether when the nightmarish world ceased to be. Though it is a shame that they and their kind were in turn completely removed from Aether's biota as a result.
Dark Shredders were the result of Ing possessing Shredders and turned them into Darklings. The Shredder was the preferred vehicle position for the Ing that lived near the dark waters that filled Dark Aether, and could be used to essentially live in the dark water indefinitely, as they were able to override the planet's normal behavior to get them to live in the water rather than the ground. Similar to normal Shredders, Dark Shredders would wait patiently beneath the dark water until a prey item approached them, at which point they would flock out in groups, though in rare occasions an individual could fly out randomly, suggesting that the possession was not as complete as they would have liked, and try to attack their prey with light body blows. If they felt that they were threatened, however, these creatures would exhibit the same bodily behavior as a normal Shredder and fly towards the target before exploding in a cloud of dark thorns to end their target's existence.
As a result of the life in the water though, these creatures were actually a bit weaker defensively than the light world counterparts and could be dispatched in the exact same manner with a bit less firepower, making them only a threat when they were flanking a much larger entity, thus placing them within the boundaries of threat level Beta.
Dark Drenched were the result of normal Drenched being possessed by the Ing and converted into Darklings. Their appearance did not change too much in this transformation, but they did gain a very dark blue skin texture all over, and the eyes were replaced with the same yellow eye spots seen in other Darklings like the Dark Talon Metroid. They essentially acted just like the light world counterpart, and still retained the same basic weaknesses as well as an added vulnerability to light-based weapons. Even so, these creatures were sturdier than the normal counterparts, could survive even the dark waters of Dark Aether, and would take much more damage to reveal the nerve cluster at the base of their tail. Though for some reason it then took less damage to kill them by attacking the nerve cluster directly once the shell had been removed.
Regardless, since they were merely the same as Drenched, albeit a bit tougher and totally immune to the poisonous waters of Dark Torvus Bog, they rank within threat level Gamma.
While Dark Drenched were the result of adolescent Drenched being possessed by the Ing, there was at least one of these creatures that was possessed in its adult form and size. Aside from proving to be a very dangerous adversary for any creature, it was also possessed by the warrior Ing that is still on the Hunter's grapple beam, thus giving the creature the appropriate title of the Grapple Guardian. While the tail region of this monster still retained the same weakness as its lesser counterparts, the Grapple Guardian was vicious in protecting its only weak point, almost never charging forward far enough to make itself vulnerable from behind and only using its horns and teeth as physical weapons when in very close quarters. The blue, elongated horn of this creature allowed it to fire a powerful grapple beam that would use to grab prey of any type from afar and pull them closer to its body in order to attack and kill said prey with its jaws, though the presence of a massive hole in its jaw questions whether or not the beast did this for the sake of sustenance or just because it liked killing other creatures. Regardless, this power could be used to stun the creature if it attached itself by accident to one of the electrical generated pillars in the sacrificial chamber it dwelled within, as the device would send an immobilizing feedback to any creature that electrically bonded with it through the grapple beam technology, giving the hunter the prime opportunity to attack the beast from behind. Aside from this, the only way she was able to actually stun the creature was by firing at the single sensitive eye on the middle of its face, as enough damage would stun the creature and grant the hunter the opportunity to attack it from behind. Once she was able to blow off the tail of the creature and reveal its nerve cluster, it became extremely agitated and hunted her down with great gusto, destroying the energy conduits with a blast of energy and thus limiting the only way to easily make it vulnerable.
Nonetheless, the hunter was still able to destroy this ravenous beast after a long and arduous fight, but its incredible resilience and aggressive nature made a terrible threat that only extreme firepower and careful tactics were able to actually finally put down, placing it comfortably within threat level Delta and marking it as one of the most successful creations of the Ing on Dark Aether.
Although normal swarms tend to be too weak and limited of a subject for Darkling generation by the Ing to be considered, the hunter came into contact with a single main exception in the pits of Dark Torvus Bog's waters, the Power Bomb Guardian. Sitting on top of a column in the Undertemple of Dark Aether, this monster came about as a result of a spore being possessed by the warrior Ing that had stolen her power bomb equipment, and had made the beast a surprisingly formidable foe. Instead of poisons and needles, this Darkling possessed the power to fire off an infinite supply of power bombs, and had been so heavily energized by the power that it effectively become immune to all types of beam and missile weaponry. The monster seemed like it was impossible to hurt, but in looking around the room, the hunter noticed that there was a series of bomb slots on the walls near a bunch of spider bolt tracks, and each one was connected to a clamp supporting the thick, uppermost platform in the room. She used the spider bolt tracks to climb up the sides of the room and activated each of the bomb slots. Every time she did this, it sent an electrical current right through the extended limb on the other side of the platform that not only released one of the clamps holding the platform in place, but actually electrocuted the Darkling and damaged it. As she continued to damage the creature, it began firing off power bombs much more frequently and in rapid clusters, and was supported on all sides by an increasing number of inglets. But as soon as the hunter had finished releasing the last clamp, the platform supports fully gave out and the massive piece of metal fell into the Darkling's orb, crushing it to death instantly.
Even though this isolated creature might not have been notably dangerous on its own, the fact that it's able to generate and wield power bombs with such immense frequency nonetheless makes it a plant that is best left extinct, and at least deserving of a place within threat level Gamma. There are a few new types of Ing worth looking over in this toxic bog as well here.
The Ing Sphere Cache is not really a storage pod at all, but a type of Ing of low rank that is forced to act as a living storage unit for the rest of its kind and their Darklings in Dark Torvus Bog. These creatures had a thin, dark base that they stood on, and a more bulbous main body that had a transparent shield covering its internal tissues, and a series of filaments on the top that moved back and forth slowly, allowing the creature to feed on the dark energy of the native land. They stored their goods in a dimensional pocket that was designed to only be accessible to the Ing, but sustained fire could destroy the creature and the dimensional pocket in turn. This had the potential to destroy the item inside as well, but this was a risk worth taking to gather the supplies that they were protecting. Hunter Ing were the most powerful assassins among the Ing, and were well known for their nigh invincibility and capacity to readily destroy anything and everything that they set their sights upon. Their bodily form was drastically different from that of a warrior Ing, and took much less of an animalistic approach to it, resembling a floating mesh of black wires in a ball shape, containing a massive cluster of sensory cells inside, and 4 thin tentacles adorning the outer frame for offense. Instead of attacking their prey head-on like a warrior Ing, these creatures preferred to wait in the shadows before attacking, as they possessed the power to completely phase in and out of space-time, and thus made themselves completely and utterly invincible to all types of attack. Once they felt they had the right angle to attack from, these creatures would either rush towards the target for a massive body tackle, spin around rapidly and whirl into the target for whipping damage, which seemed to work the best for them when hunting night barbs, or enter an energetic state where they could slowly fire their 4 tentacles towards the target to impale them, and could hold each tentacle in place temporarily to create a potential hazard for anything that accidentally walked into them. It was this last attack that could prove to be the only real downfall to these monsters though, as the sensory cell cluster would glow brightly when using the attack, and they were rendered completely vulnerable to damage. Those shots from a weapon like the light beam were usually the only thing that could be used for maximum damage before they started to phase in and out of space-time again.
Dedicated to hunting the biggest enemies of the Ing horde, Hunter Ing were vicious creatures that would never stop pursuing the prey until they or their prey died. and while it technically took less damage overall to kill than a warrior ing, the ability to phase in and out of reality and transfer that power into the possession of dark pirate commandos only further proved just how dangerous these animal monsters really were, earning them a spot within threat level beta.
Similar to the Jump Guardian, the Boost Guardian was a mutated warrior ing that has stolen the power of the Hunter's boost ball within Dark Aether. As with the Jump Guardian, this monster possessed all the normal abilities seen in warrior ing, but also had a few new tricks available to it. As soon as the monster started to feel extreme pain, it would sheath itself with energy to protect itself before converting its physical form into a morph ball-shaped object, using the power of the boost ball to rocket around the Dark Torvus arena it dwelt in an attempt to slam into the Hunter. In this state, the creature could not be hurt directly, but it would eventually return to an amorphous blob form and try to hurt her in that state. Using morph ball bombs to the beast in its ball form could instantly force it into its puddle form, and repeated strikes from more bombs could force the puddle to return to its natural state, opening it up to damage once again. The Boost Guardian was able to call on the services of English for backup, but this is actually more of a blessing than a curse, as they and the 4 pillars in the Dark Torvus arena could be destroyed by the Boost Guardian to leave restoratives for emergency situations.
Overall, the Boost Guardian was a powerful opponent that more than proved to be a challenge for the Hunter, but its defeat did eventually come, and while not terribly powerful compared to some other entities in Dark Torvus Bog, it more than proved to be a serious threat and thus deserves a place within threat level Gamma. And finally, we have the Guardian of the Dark Torvus Temple.
The Chika was a monstrous insect that was placed in the Dark Torvus Temple as a guard for the energy controller of Dark Torvus Bog. And while it may not have seemed like a serious threat at first, it wasn't too long before this monster became a serious irritant and there were noxious waters filling the land. When the Hunter first encountered the creature, she found it as a larva attached to the wall by strands of biomatter. Destroying the supports allowed the cocoon in place to crumble into the water below, only for the Chika larva to fly up and over her before diving back into the water. At that point in time, the creature was still an infant, with a large caterpillar-like body with a bright blue mouth and other soft tissue pieces adorning its frame and belly, additionally possessing a thick tail with extrasensory hairs on the sides that allowed it to sense movement on the central platform of its arena and to detect the presence of the Hunter wherever it went, as it had yet to develop any eyes to actually see with. Despite the fact that the creature was placed in Dark Aether, in its larval form, it was actually not a Darkling, and was merely defending itself from attack and battling the Hunter, possessing both a light and dark nature that made it only vulnerable to the dark and light beams. Indirectly, the Chika larva had a habit of swimming just below the surface of the dark waters in the Dark Torvus Temple, with its body only ever peeking up enough to hit it for a few brief moments, all the while agitating dark shredders in the water into attacking the Hunter as she tried to aim at the Chika larva. Directly, the Chika larva could attack her in one of two ways, either leaps and a tongue lashing. As the creature started to breathe heavily beneath the water, it would often fling its body high into the air before crashing down into the water once more, sending out a shockwave of dark water the Hunter had to jump over in order to avoid. If the monster felt that it needed to attack more directly than even that, it would also heave its massive frame up onto the central platform and fling its tongue at her, trying to draw her in close where the larva could take a bite out of her. Sustained fire was able to beat the creature back into slowly retreating though, and a multitude of charged shots could be used to even stun it for a time. Eventually enough damage was dealt to the creature that completely vanished beneath the surface of the water, seemingly dead. However, as the water began to lower, the Hunter noticed that here was yet another cocoon attached to the wall, this one possessing the distinct shape of the larva. As the central platform began to destabilize into 3 separate islands, only linked by grapple points, the adult Chika burst out of its cocoon in a frenzy. It seems that the exposure to the dark waters of Dark Torvus Bog had mutated the Chika and forced it to age rapidly, obtaining its adult form in a fraction of the time it was supposed to take. In its adult form, the Chika was much harder to hit as its dragonfly-like body was very thin and narrow, and the creature moved about so quickly that it quickly proved futile for the Hunter to try and hit it with anything other than a rapid-fire power beam. In its adult stage, the Chika attacked in one of two ways. It either struck by forcefully charging at the Hunter in an attempt to knock her into the dark water, or would lower its abdomen into the dark water and suck it up, firing it from its mouth thereafter as a rapid-fire spray of toxic water that can only be jumped over. The adult form of the Chika was incredibly resistant against pain, and even though it could be damaged enough to daze it, it was not enough to actually hurt the creature. However, in stunning the beast, the Hunter noticed that the wings were connected to the body with supports that are vulnerable to direct attack. And with the Chika's body holding steadily, she could target each of these weak points on the backside of the wings and destroy them to weaken the Chika's flying abilities. The Hunter was eventually able to use this to her advantage and destroyed all the supports on the beast's wings, forcing it to drop back down into the waters below. It was not long after this though that the Chika rose up from the waters and took on yet another form. Though it had been a light-willed creature in its vulnerability to the dark beam, exposure to too much dark water forced the Chika to mutate even further to become the Dark Chika. In this form, the weak points on the creature's wings had been reinforced with dark energy like the rest of its body, and thus rendered invulnerable to attack, but the creature's abdomen had also swelled immensely in size, enough to make it a weak point that could be targeted to destroy the creature completely. Although the hunter was able to inflict considerable damage against the monster, it was not enough to destroy it at first, as the creature was able to make use of its swollen abdomen to inject all of its dark power into growing eggs, forcing them to be born instantly with the dark Chika return to its normal form. These offspring, called Chikalings, were heavily mutated as a result of exposure to dark energy, and had thus been born as flyers, skipping the larval stage completely. Well, these little monsters, which look just like tiny Chika larvae with wings, were vehement in protecting their parent against attack, and a large swarm their bodies were too weak to be of much use and were easily destroyed by even the hunter's weapons. She had to clear another attack cycle to get the Chika to change form once more, but during a second cycle as the Dark Chika, the hunter was finally able to deal critical damage to the creature and killed it, allowing the rest of the dark water to drain from the Dark Torvus Temple.
This entire family of insectoids was among the most powerful that could be found in Dark Aether at the time of their existence. And while it is true the different stages of development had varying degrees of difficulty as far as how to deal with and execute them effectively, the Dark Chika itself was more than enough than a potent threat, not just for its offense but its capacity to create Chikalings while in its corrupted state. So while the Chikalings themselves were incredibly weak and only possibly be ranked higher than threat level Alpha, the original larva, adult, and mutated Dark Chika still rest within threat level Gamma, and thus were a noble threat to the hunter.
Though Torvus may have been a wonderful lush forest in the past, its current status as a flooded bog renders it one of the least cheerful locations to be on at Aether, even if the Luminoth have used the technology to try and save as much of it as they can. While many of the native flora and fauna are relatively easy for most to handle or avoid, the presence of beasts like drenched alone makes it a highly dangerous place for explorers to examine and stumble about in, far more so than many would think at first glance. This is made even more so by the beasts that now roam the flooded depths of the bog, as while the fauna there are not totally a danger entirely, blogs on their own can be a massive pain to deal with without powerful explosives to handle them. It might be a great place for those that enjoy the rain and taking a swim, but great caution should still be advised and decent armor and firepower highly recommended, as well as plenty of gear for underwater exploration if you don't want to be outsped or outmaneuvered by the monsters that dwell in its deepest depths.
That wraps up this info video on Torvus Bog on Aether, and I hope this will prove to be quite useful for those that are looking to take a visit there sometime in the future. We've more than gotten our feet wet here, but don't get too comfortable. The highest locale of them all in Aether is right around the corner, so be prepared for some high-tech nightmares and futuristic views as we take a look and explore the Luminoth's most advanced cliffside facility, the Sanctuary Fortress. Thank you for reaching the end of this presentation. While we might not always get along, the Space Pirates and myself, in whatever capacity we can manage, are dedicated to analyzing and examining the life forms of many different worlds, extant and extinct, to show the great variety of life that exists out within the greater cosmos. If you enjoyed this info video or would like to see more, please like, comment, and subscribe for more information. We'll do our best to keep pumping out data so the greater public has an understanding of what to expect when exploring alien planets and their denizens. With that, have a safe journey, and have your bribes prepared beforehand if you happen to come near our territory.